Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. And last time actually doesn't exist. I have bad news, everybody. So, this seems to happen to me once every playthrough. I don't know why I always make this mistake. I wish I didn't, but unfortunately, it's what happens. I recorded an episode right after the one that, you last saw, and in it I went and I defeated Amygdala with the stake driver. I don't even have it equipped anymore because I, wanted to give it a fond farewell. And then I looked over and I realized I hadn't been recording. And so all that progress is just gone, right? So I made a few observations and I looked at a few items. So I want to try and retrace my steps as well as I can. I'm going to sort of try and recreate the fight. I can't show you how fun it was to fight Amygdala with that arcane stake driver. It was incredible. At one point, I even got off the full blast on its head. It wasn't a direct hit, right? It took too long, right? There's a moment when Amygdala, who's the boss that I was going to fight in the Nightmare Frontier. I don't mind getting ahead of myself now because I'm going to flash back to me. Like, it's going to be weird. Anyway, the boss sort of lowers its head in a moment, and I tried to do the charged R2, and it took too long. But even though it took too long, I was close enough that when I got the explosion off, its head was still down far enough that it still got caught in part of the explosion and took some damage. So that was amazing. It was a very fun fight. I thought it might be a harder battle, but actually, if you just sort of do this typical melee strategy where you're like able to make use of the fairly wide arena that you fight in and you run around a bunch, you can sort of run up and smack it, and the arcane nature of the damage that you do with the stake driver means that it does a good deal of damage to Amygdala's head, and I was able to wear it down and eventually claim victory. And it was a lot of fun, but I don't have that build. Like, this is the only build I have right now that could possibly recreate that. So I don't think I can try and recreate that feat for you on another playthrough. I can show you what it's like to fight Amygdala with twin pistols, and I don't know what that's like myself yet. I've never had that experience. I've never done a double gun playthrough before, except for the one that I got all the way up to the Forbidden Woods, which is pretty darn close to where it needs to be for Amygdala. So I'm going to go and off camera do this thing where, future Matt this time. This time I am not future Matt. This time I am past Matt. This gets very confusing. But future Matt will go and deal with Amygdala with twin pistols. That'll be fun. And then I'll throw to far future Matt, at which point we will get to the point where you can see me again, sort of recapping everything, and we'll fix this as best I can. So I'm sorry you didn't get to see that first version of the fight, but you will get to see a version of the fight, and it will be my first time fighting with that particular weapon set. Before we do that, though, I figure while I'm here, I might as well look over that special Coldblood item that I got, right? And I want to take some time to go through because, again, right, we have all these Coldblood items here, right? And if we look visually at... I've always failed to sort of really visually put together what's going on with Coldblood, but I always want to try, right? We have the droplet level that's sort of normal human, right? And you don't get too many Coldblood, you don't get too many blood echoes, too many, bequeathed blood will from the regular level here. And that goes for 3 levels of that, and you can see there's more froth in each one around the edges. And then we start again, the froth is somewhat at a minimum. We have a larger bubble in the center, and then sort of a ring of bubbles around. It's sort of this weird liquid. This is the thick version, and this one is produced by a strong will. So we've gone from a regular sort of normal will to a strong will that produces thick cold blood. And once again, each progressive level, you get more froth going on in the image, and then you get a larger central bubble with sort of large other bubbles surrounding it as we move into the frenzied cold blood, or the mad cold blood, if you want to be a little bit more literal. This is where we get frenzied blood echoes, right? We're starting to describe the blood echoes themselves at this level. And, visually you have all this bubbling stuff, and it's comes from a human mind that is not normal, that is truly mad, right? It's this idea that you get in a lot of sort of cosmic horror, that there is truth in madness. It's all through Bloodborne. This is one of the places you can see it. And I think by implication, right, you have the strong will, and now you have the you have some other descriptions that talk about the product of an obsession, and that gives you strength. So you have this mania, this frenzy, that these people are just on the verge of insanity, and possibly like focused. They can see the truth because of that, and there is a power in that madness. There's a power in that mania that they have, that you can draw on. And once again, you have the base image with increased froth as the level gets higher, and now we have kin Coldblood. And you can argue a little bit with the use of the term kin, right? So kenzoku, the Japanese term here, it does mean one's family, but it also has a little bit of sense of dependence or like a household. So it's not necessarily all about like an equal relationship. It's sort of an up-down relationship, right? Parents and children, right? That sort of idea. Like there is a relationship happening here, but it's sort of like this would be kin in the sense of, again, like parent and child maybe. And you can see that sort of in the second sense of kenzoku, which is a follower or a retainer, right? Some sort of underling. That's, I haven't looked at a detailed Japanese dictionary like definition, but that's like, if you look it up in a Japanese to English dictionary, you'll probably find those two senses, right? That of, family, but sort of a household situation. And then of course you have the idea of, an actual retainer or a servant or something to that extent. But once we get to the description, I think you can sort of see why kin is more prominent in this. Like, I think kin is a good idea. Anyway, and then of course, shiketsu, we've seen that before. Literally death blood. Cold blood, I think, works reasonably well as a translation there. But it is important to keep in your head that like it's blood that's gone cold because it comes from the dead, right? This is Bloodborne. We gain strength from the dead. And so anyway, let's move on to the description. First line, we have, cold blood or death blood of the inhuman kin. And we're actually getting tachi here, right? Kenzoku tachi. So this is a specified plural in Japanese. So it's not just one inhuman kin, it's kin plural. Also, hito no ranu, we've seen that term before, right? It's sort of used to be inhuman, occasionally in like an like greater sense, right? So they're inhuman, they're beyond human. It's spiritual sort of connotation to the term. We saw that, I think, in the Tumerians, who are described in Japanese as hito no ranu, and they're like superhuman, I think, in the official translation. You don't necessarily have to be superhuman. It doesn't have to be beyond human, right? That's a connotation that I'm putting on there. Like, it could be relatively neutral as just inhuman, but I kind of like the idea, and I think it fits with this idea of the kin, as we'll see. So there is a little bit of sort of a hierarchical structure that's ingrained here in the Japanese that might be a little bit difficult to get out of the English. But that's the sort of the second half of the thing that I've done first, right? So death blood, cold blood of the inhuman kin who are connected to great ones. It could be a great one, but I don't think so, right? The Japanese doesn't specify a plural with great ones, but I'm pretty sure that when we see great one there, we can understand that in the plural because we're talking about plural kin. And the like connection is very literal, but you could think about that as like a familial connection. You could also think about that as like a retainer sort of situation. Maybe that's possible, but again, we'll just get to this idea, right? Throughout Bloodborne, you have the idea of bloodlines, right? The importance of children, particularly to the great ones. The idea of lineage, the idea of will echoing forward beyond death, right? This is a world where the will of the dead is preserved in blood and then channeled into the hunter, right? And so legacy, right? Strength from the dead. All these things are important to the world of Bloodborne. So the idea that you have this connection between the inhuman kin and the great ones, I'm just very strongly influenced towards this idea that it's a familial tie. So I like the idea that this is kin to the great ones. And the Japanese does have a little bit of an extra nuance, right, of not necessarily being on an equal relational level, but, there's only so much you can do. I think kin, if you're going to do a one-word translation, that does a good job. Anyway, second line of the description here. By means of use, you gain indescribable blood echoes, or, bequeathed blood will. Meijo shigatai is the Japanese word that is very prominent in a Lovecraft story translation. The title was translated as Meijo shigatai mono, and that particular title, I can't actually remember the title of the English short story, but it's something like The Unnameable, right? And so if you read the short story, it's sort of this, it starts out with this argument between these two characters, and one of them is saying to the other, how is this word, actually possible? I don't understand how you can have this indescribable, unnameable thing that you don't fully understand, that you can't put into words, that you would need to use this term, unnameable, unknowable, whatever it is that I can't remember. I'll find it in editing and I'll put it on the screen. And the second character is to well, I think you can have that experience. And then, of course, the first character goes and has this sort of cosmic horror experience where he gets a taste of something that he can't name, right? He can't describe it. He can't put it into words. It is greater than his capacity for language, and so he is unable to describe it, right? And if you look at the literal Japanese, right, it's difficult to put a name to is somewhat of a literal translation there. But the idea is, right, you can't put it into words, right? Just from that idea of that short story. So I don't know how strong that reference is meant to be, but it definitely gives you this idea of experience beyond what you could describe as a human being, beyond what you could put into language. And that's important because this final line of the Japanese here, after the little break, you get, from this point forward is past humanity or beyond humanity. I say humanity, very literally past a person or people. But I think that's being used as a stand-in for humanity. I think that's pretty clear, right? So you have this idea that up until this point, right, we have all these blood echoes, and I went through sort of the catalog of them first, right? You start with the do. That's just a regular person's will echoing beyond death. And then you have the thick cold blood, which is a strong will, also possible to be created by a human. Then you get to the frenzied level, right? And these people, they might be mad. You get, you start adding a descriptor to the bequeathed blood will, to the blood echoes. And once you add this descriptor, it's frenzied. It's barely contained. This is the height of human achievement, is this madness that is also this strange wisdom. And then you get here to, I actually have to go up to the actual level here. You get here, and from this point forward, it's beyond humanity. And I, once again, want to bring this back to the bloodstones, right? Because of the things that are born by blood that you get from death, right? It's, you get the cold blood, which has the blood echoes. You get the solid substance in blood that hardens after death. And depending on which form it takes, right? If it crystallizes, it becomes a gem. If it hardens, it becomes a bloodstone. But you get, right, the final two lines of the bloodstone chunk. Ordinary humans don't have enough blood to form chunks. So you have to seek dangerous foes, or hunt dangerous foes is the final line there. So you sort of get this idea that these two here, right, the shard and the twin shards, you can sort of get these from the blood of regular people. This is beyond the level of humanity, right? And we're seeing this same jump in the cold blood now because we've gone beyond the level of humanity. From this point forward, you've left the realm of things that people are capable of, right? It has to be kin. Right? It has to be, let's do the very final part of this description here. It's actually the bulk of the final line there, but that's just because Byurugen wasu is so long in katakana, right? The holy mystery that either was witnessed or had audience with Bergenworth once in the past, right? So from this point forward, it's beyond humanity, the divine mystery that Bergenworth either, saw if it's Mieta, or had audience with if it's Mamieta. I think it's had audience with. I've said that before. And then Byurugen was the sort of particle in between there is no. That could be replacing a ga. So again, it doesn't have to be at Bergenworth that this witnessing took place. It could just be like Bergenworth being used for the group of Bergenworth scholars. That one I'm not quite as sure about, but I like the implications that it has, so I'm going to go with it. Right? So you have the idea that you need something like the arcane encounter that the people from Bergenworth had when they went down into the Doom of the Gods, and presumably, possibly, like this is also speculative, ran into Ebrietas. So that I think is like very cool. And also interesting, right? They're talking about this, right, as like kin, but there are Coldblood items that are exclusive to the Chalice dungeons, right? I don't think we'll get to them. You might get the lowest tier of them outside of the Chalices, but I don't think you do. I think in order to get Great One Coldblood, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can get Great One Coldblood outside the Chalices, but the two highest levels, Old Great One Coldblood, and I think there's one that you can't actually get that you're supposed to be able to, but it's like bugged. I remember reading something about that when I was doing research for Translation Born at some point. Is Revered Great One Coldblood or Revered Old Great One? I can't remember exactly what the name is. But the highest levels of Coldblood are only accessible in like the deepest levels of the Chalice dungeons, and it's very interesting. And I think maybe you could sort of tie that into the idea of the old blood. Maybe not, right? Maybe so, maybe not, because the blood that you take with like communion from the healing church, right? That's blood vials, right? That's transfusion blood. It's not necessarily the blood that you get cold blood from, right? Cold blood has a different effect. It contains the blood echoes. So maybe the fact that there's unique cold blood in the Chalice dungeons isn't necessarily meant to be taken as synonymous with like the old blood, the blood of the great ones. I don't know, right? I like I've said, I'm pretty fond of the idea that, Fear of the Old Blood, it is referencing this special substance they found in the tomb, and it is the blood of the great ones, essentially, right? I sort of like that idea, or whatever the old blood is. And so I sort of want to tie those two things together, but they are in separate item categories, and I don't know how much it's safe to cross them. So I thought I'd raise that as a possibility. I'll probably raise it again in Translation Born because I haven't talked about it. I haven't gotten the item. I want to talk, I want to get the item before I talk about it in Translation Born. So, like, if anyone's wondering why I'm still, like, in the middle of diving through the specific chalices that I am in that playthrough, that's why. I want to get a hold of some of this, like, super special cold blood. But anyway, that's not really related to the kin. That's just to say that there is another level above this that we're not necessarily going to get through, because I can't remember if we get the Great One Cold Blood in the upper world. Anyway, this is the point at which, we've left the world of humanity behind and we start getting things that are kin. They're connected, right, to the higher rank ones, and it's their blood echoes. It's their indescribable bequeathed blood will that we begin to inherit and weave into ourselves when we use this level of item. So, interesting thing to think about. Anyway, I've talked about that long enough. This was basically how I started the Lost episode, where I went and fought Amygdala with the stake driver. So now I will hand things off to Future Matt, and I'll let him have some fun playing around with the twin pistol build, and we'll go take on Amygdala. And then I'll come back, and there are just a few more points that I want to make before I completely close out the episode. So, all right. Take it away, Future Matt. Thanks, Past Matt. It is I, Future Matt, and I am here. We're back on the build with my twin pistol setup. We're outside this door with the, bird arch, another one of them, as it matches what we saw on the elevator all the way over there, up past that enemy. And I've simply just run down in this direction, in case you were not aware. The poison swamp is right here, and you can see how this is all laid out. But we're not going to concern ourselves with that. We're going to be heading into the boss arena. It's going to be very different than the last time I was fighting this boss because, well, I've got the twin pistols. I've never fought this boss this way before. We're going to find out what it's like, and should be interesting, I hope. While we're doing so, keep in mind the appearance and the nature of this boss. We're going to come back to that, but I probably won't be able to call too much attention to it during the fight because I'll have other things on my mind. Anyway, here we go. Let's see what we can do. So we got to keep our eyes up. Come on now. Keep our eyes up. There it is. Boom. All right. I get some bone marrow ash going on here. Okay. I should mention, I do have, okay, that is a stationary head. I will take it. 627 with bone marrow ash. Okay. Uh-oh. Don't want to be in that line. All right, 142 from my right-hand weapon. 164 from my left. Yeah, the pistol's been doing a little bit more damage pretty consistently than my right-hand weapon here. Oops. Okay, good. I want the visceral on this. Because this is a build where I have 20 points invested in skill. Oh, that was fun. Keep your head right there. Yes. Uh-oh. Boy, it's a good thing that laser hit is delayed. Aw, I was just a little bit late on the dodge button. That's okay. Yeah, one of the challenges with this build is going to be the, wow, 635. That bone marrow ash is great. I love it. We're already at this point in the fight. This is incredible. Oh, I was worried. I have to say, I was worried that I wouldn't have the firepower. No pun intended. But this is just a destruction derby here. I wasn't sure I'd know when to take the shots. Ah. Also, super cool. This boss does have the thing. Oh, it tears off. Oh, that last bullet snuck in there. Excellent. Oh, what a different fight. The last one with the stake driver was sort of a, you know, cat and mouse, roll to dodge, run in, and then swipe. That sort of attack, right? It is very long and slow, and the boss gets these jump attacks that it will do at you, and you have to, like, roll forward in just the right way and try and time an attack when its head is lowered after it lands from its jump. We didn't need to worry about any of that. I just went pew, 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 pew. Incredible. And the bone marrow ash doing all that damage? Whew, crazy. Now, in all fairness, I did upgrade, how do I show that? I want to go to the weapons here. I did get the Rider Palash up to +7, but as you were seeing, it was still being out-damaged by my +6 pistol. So, yeah, that was something. All right, so I'm going to find, I think the lantern's in here, which I think I called this out in the previous episode. This particular tower, right, it looks like it's stone-built, particularly from far away. It doesn't seem to fit the rest of the surroundings of the Nightmare Frontier here, right? We have all these piles of gravestones that form the walls. Looks like these weird sort of organic almost things, and we have lots of spiral markings. Very strange. Come over here. The front facade here has similar spiral markings all up this building. So maybe it's not quite as out of place as it would appear from afar. And of course, visually, we've seen that boss before. That was the thing that grabbed us. It was the thing that, teleports us into the lecture building. And then this is the part that never quite lines up for me, right? I feel like Patches is supposed to, like, push us into this boss fight, and that never really paid off. And, like, we found our way here, but it wasn't because Patches put us anywhere, right? Patches actively, like, hinders us finding the Great One, essentially. And yeah, I just don't fully understand, because we're going to get a line. We can talk to Patches again. It's going to be a little while, but we got a line from him as if he's very surprised, like he intended us to be confronted by his god, and he did nothing to bring us closer to his god except for the first time. But in that first instance, he was saying, "Have mercy on the poor bastard." So I don't know. Also, this is an interesting thing to confirm, right? Because Patches does refer to this thing as sort of his god, essentially, right? And we know from the previous item descriptions that I've been reading that the Great Ones are considered as gods, right? And they're a little bit more, I don't know, objective viewpoint of the description writer. They are close to gods, but they're definitely considered as gods, right? And also, we know this is what I was speculating about in case you're someone new. I'm very sorry. I'm not doing a good job of welcoming you into the game, I don't think. But if you are new to Bloodborne, and I was sort of musing back in that swamp that there were those undulating creatures that seemed to be invertebrates all through those swamps. And, you know, great ones are always preceded by the invertebrates that are signs of their presence. I mean, the invertebrates aren't all, like, gathered around here the way they are for some other great ones. And there's some other contradictory evidence that we haven't quite gotten to yet that is also potentially quite relevant to this discussion. But it is interesting that in this particular setup, you do have to run through an area with lots of invertebrates before you get to this great one of a boss. So, some very interesting things going on there. Anyway, I am now going to... well, I was going to say warp back to the dream. I'm actually going to be warping around a few different places. And, once again, we're again making a foray into things that aren't my strong suit here. But I do want to point out we have this similar sort of swirly thing with these pronounced arches. Maybe, if you can consider them that. Like, they're visually similar to me to, like, the bird arches that we see around. They're not obviously birds in this version, but... I don't know. Again, like, more potential visual signifiers that this is all a little bit more unified than you would think. You've got these swirly designs on the walls. What was this place? What was this civilization? Was it a civilization? Is this the remains? How is this here? Did the rest of the land sort of devolve out of this? Was this the, like, placed here from another culture? And this landscape grew around it? It's very unclear what's happening in this particular nightmare. Looks pretty cool, though, right? Yeah, the visual design of Bloodborne has always been very impressive. Anyway, having called some attention to that, even though I can't really give you any expert guidance, I am going to be warping around. There are a few things that I do feel, even in my amateurish state, I can make some comments on visually. We're going to warp around to some of those places now. All right, here we are in the Grand Cathedral, as you should recognize from this very, like, puzzling, interesting, like, visually rich tableau. That's not the thing that I'm going to be visually analyzing here. Much more simple, much more basic. Here we go, look at this. We have these enemies right here, and they line this entire staircase. I'm calling them enemies. They're essentially like gods, right? Because we know that Amygdala, that boss we just fought, is sort of a boss, right? It's a great one. And what do we have lining the statues of the Grand Cathedral? That same great one with its, you know, very easily identifiable almond-shaped head, right? And that's, I've talked about before, I think when we first got the tonsil stone, right? There's a link between all of these things and almond shapes, which linguistically, if you go back in, like, English, it's not really English, right? I forget if it's, like, Greek or Latin. One of the roots of the almond shape is amygdalis or amygdalae. Amygdala, right? The amygdala, the reason it's called that is because it's almond-shaped. These things have almond-shaped heads. We have an almond-shaped stone that influences our ability to use one of them as sort of a way into a nightmare, right? So it sort of changes an interaction that we would otherwise have with an almond head-shaped, right? An almond-shaped creature. And then we have these things here, objects of apparently worship of some sort in the Healing Church. So there's one visual parallel that's important to keep in mind. And we're going to go somewhere else to get another visual parallel to keep in mind. This one might be a little bit more of a trek for me, but it should be no difference to you, so I'll see you again soon. All right, we're here. We're back in the Forbidden Woods. I've been making sort of parallels throughout the course of this playthrough between the Forbidden Woods and the Nightmare Frontier as sort of wastelands attached to Bergenworth. Make of that what you will, but I do think we're seeing here, as you may have already caught on in the background, we have some visual evidence that the people of the Forbidden Woods, maybe, also got some influence and started crafting these almond-shaped heads, maybe? Right? Not entirely sure. Are these finished? I think if you go from, like, a specific angle, maybe you can see a little bit better whether or not they have bodies. So this one back here certainly seems to, and this one looks like, look, it looks like one of its arms sort of broke off, right? So these do appear to be similar, like Amygdala. Listen to me. I'm switching Amendozu, the Japanese, with amygdala. But we do have these like amygdala. I'm all over the place today, apparently. And after I already completely messed up the recording for whatever. Oh, hello. I did not hear you, but I saw you slink into my vision. I'm going to run out of bullets. The interesting thing about this build, right? You just saw me destroy Amygdala as a boss. But the real challenge I find is getting your resources to stretch long enough that when you're exploring the rest of the world, you can make a good exploration of a like particular section. I had to take the poison swamp sort of section by section, slowly pushing forward, because my blood vials are tied to both my bullets and my health. There are only so many like regular bullets I can rely on. It was a very interesting thing to sort of manage my resource levels going through the Nightmare Frontier, particularly because you're constantly poisoned and getting frenzied and all these things. That like cuts your resources levels down pretty low. So that like traversal of the Nightmare Frontier was decently challenging, which is why I was thinking the boss fight might not be. But once it actually came to the boss, that was way easier than I thought it was going to be. So interesting. I mean, granted, Amygdala, I have some experience fighting that boss from a ranged build, right? I've done some like Executioner Gloves runs against Amygdala, and I do know that Amygdala is relatively susceptible to that sort of thing. So not entirely stunned, but that's not the fight I was expecting. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore here. I did want to bring up the fact that these statues appear to be sort of like the Amygdala statues that we see in the Healing Church, only they're noticeably more decrepit, and we've got moss growing over them, and the statuary seems to be older, and it might just be because it's left out, right? It may be similar age, but it's declined more because it's out in the woods. That's also possible. And then, of course, we also have, right nearby, these gravestones, just like we see in the Nightmare Frontier. These massive graves, and as well as these more normal graves. And you'll notice, like I was talking about the different setups with the graves, some of them look like they're split open in the Nightmare. Others look like they have these weird sort of veins going through them. These ones have the veins. These ones have, and on the like crevices here, if I pull open the monocular, where are we? Here we are. Let's use this. You should be able to see these are invertebrates, right? These are phantasms. Signs of the great ones nearby. And I'm not entirely sure what to make of that, but it's an interesting detail for sure. Another potential thing that you could say about this being relatively close to the Tomb of the Gods. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight in coming here and showing off this visual stuff is we're getting a lot of visual similarities to the things we saw in the Nightmare Frontier. And one of the theories that I've been going back and forth on in this playthrough is how close the idea of, or how close, how far we can take the idea of this world as a nightmare, right? This world attached to the city of Yharnam. Is it really a nightmare? Is it the really real world? And it's very ambiguous. We have a lot of visual evidence here pointing us towards the idea that, okay, this is just the same sort of stuff that we saw in the Nightmare Frontier. Now, personally, like I said, I'm not great at going with visual evidence, so I don't find this to be, like, particularly conclusive. But I think you could take a look at it and say, well, we have enough similar markers here in enough, like, sort of impossible situations that we could take this as evidence of all of Yharnam being a dream. So I wanted to point that out, just in fairness. I'm still exploring. I'm a little bit leery of this because it seems a little bit too good to be true. It seems a little bit like I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. But I'm trying to explore the idea that, since I came up with it a couple episodes back, that we're in this situation where the dreams have sort of started to penetrate the reality, And maybe this is something that's accentuated on Nights of the Hunt, because as we'll see at some point in this playthrough, right, one of the effects of the blood moon is to sort of blur boundaries. And the blurred boundaries in question aren't the same as the boundaries between dream and reality, but they could have a similar effect upon the structure of the world, right? Maybe the structure of the world is more rigid when it's not a Night of the Hunt, and in particular, a Night of the Hunt where you're seeing the blood moon, or the moon is not quite so close, right? So these are all reasons to be thinking about maybe there is some influence of the dreams sort of seeping in. Of course, there is another explanation, if we just want to go with the 100% literal reality interpretation, for why, I don't know about these graves, but these statues, right? One of the things that you see if you read some Lovecraftian fiction, this is very famous in Call of Cthulhu, is that you have these groups of people all over the world who are like artistically inclined, and they all sort of they start crafting these same things, even though they have no way of contacting one another. And it's one of the signs that they're being influenced on a subconscious level by sort of the thoughts of the Lovecraftian universe's great ones. I forget exactly what the term is, proper Lovecraftian term, but it's interesting to think about. Maybe that's what's going on here, right? Maybe there are certain people in the real world who've been influenced by the ideas of the dream or by the dreams of the great ones. And how much does this tie into that one sentence, right? That one very suggestive phrase, like, great large volumes of water serve as a bulwark guarding sleep. Keeping realities separate from another, but thoughts might be able to pass through. And this sort of watery barrier that might influence the structure of the sort of, I don't know, I was going to say multiverse again, but in this case, beyond the fact that Bloodborne is apparently set up as a multiverse where you can have this cooperation across worlds that sound will travel between, you've also got this idea of sort of tiered levels of reality. And it's all very interesting to think about, and I have no great answers. I do like the idea, though, like I said, even as wary as I am of sort of it being a little too good to be true, of having sort of a permutation of the dream into reality, particularly on Nights of the Hunt, that could tie into all of this as some sort of explanation. But again, very just rudimentary thoughts on my part. I just think it's fascinating. Of course, if anyone wants to elaborate more, if you feel like you're more expert on the interpretation of these visual signs of the real world being a nightmare, and you feel like I haven't done the argument justice, please feel free to expound upon that in the comments. I've really been enjoying having other people talk about things in the playthrough, how they see things differently than me, and it's been a lot of fun. So, if you're so inclined, feel free. Otherwise, okay, now, I think that's all of the lore stuff, so I'm going to call an end to this sort of future version of me. We're going to go to far future Matt. He's going to be back on our regular Old Hunt character playthrough. I'm going to have a quick announcement, and then I'm going to call this episode to a close. So, I'll hand things over to you, far future Matt. Take it away. Right, I'll take it from here, future Matt. Although now, you're in the past, so maybe I could call you half-past Matt. That was actually a suggestion from the comments, one of the other episodes. I said I'd consider using it if I did something like this again. I did something like this again, so here we are. Once again, thanks, as always, for any comments that you might want to give me. The announcement that I wanted to make, it's sort of related to that. I've been having a lot of fun keeping fairly close to real time. It's allowed me to be a lot more sort of interactive, a lot more collaborative in the sorts of things that I would be showing off otherwise. And I've had just a lot of fun being able to interact with other people as I share this playthrough going through the game. And it's been a lot of fun hearing from all of you and being able to react relatively quickly to those sorts of things. Unfortunately, that's going to have to stop. So I'm going to be away for most of the month of October. If you're watching this in real time, it is currently September. So it's coming up relatively fast. And I need to get ahead on recordings so that you don't have to deal with a month-like gap in this playthrough. I don't want to do that. I feel like I'm about ready to head back to Translation Born, and I don't want to delay that any more than I need to. So if you notice me being less responsive, if you notice that, videos have seemingly not addressed certain points or what have you as quickly as they have in the past, they probably aren't, right? I'm going to be moving to a schedule where I'm recording further and further in advance. So thank you in advance for your understanding, I guess. I figured if I waited till this point in the video, then only the people who actually care would get the announcement, at least for now, right? Eventually, I'll have to be as clear about it as possible. But again, just wanted to get that out there. Thank you all for your understanding. But anyway, we're not going to let that deter us, like I was saying. We're still going to be making progress in this playthrough throughout that entire span of time continuously. So as for where we're going to go next, we got an invitation to a particular location, and I think it's high time we followed up on that and started to pay a visit to the people who wanted us to come and say hello. So that's where we're going next. And with that final thought, hopefully none of this recording has gone wrong. I really don't want to do all this again. I will thank all of you, as always, for joining me and calling into my hunt for the evening. But I wish all of you good hunting.